So welcome everyone to Shivali's Books Online. We are the oldest independent bookstore in Los Angeles, established in 1940. Today is a very special event where we will be celebrating not one, but two beautiful new picture books. For Hannah and the Ramadan gift, we have with us Qasim Rashid. Qasim is an author and human rights lawyer focused on women's rights, religious freedoms, and children's advocacy. Hannah and the Ramadan gift is his first, but hopefully not last, kids book. With him today is Shannon Hale, who will be sharing with us Itty Bitty Kitty-CORN. Shannon Hale is a veterans kids book author whose titles include Real Friends and Best Friends, the Princess in Black series, and YA novel, Kind of a Big Deal. So both authors are doing us the great honor of a story time. After that, they'll chat, and then we'll dive into that audience Q&A that we promised. So without further ado, please welcome our stars for today, Qasim Rashid and Shannon Hale. Would you both take a couple seconds to talk about yourselves?
Yes. Qasim, why don't you go first?
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to thank our gracious host for this event. It's always a privilege to have an event with the oldest independent bookstore in Los Angeles. You guys have a rich history, and it's a privilege to be here. It's also an honor to share a stage with Shannon, who needs no introduction, and just deeply grateful to have somebody of her caliber and leadership in this space. Share her platform with me. It means a lot to me. So thank you, Shannon, for all the writing you've done and for being here today. I'm so grateful to all the folks who made this book possible, and I'm excited to share it with you and excited to hear your questions afterwards.
Well, thank you. That was so nice. Qasim and I know each other through Twitter, which is such a strange place to get to know people, because it's obviously, it's online, it's social media, it's strange. But there are always these people that you just keep finding, boy, I just agree with what they just said. Oh, that makes me feel so good, what they just said. Oh, I had never thought about that before. But the way he just said it made so much sense. And I feel like I'm a better person for having thought that now, and that was my experience with Qasim. So it's really nice too when I heard you were doing a picture book. And this is my very first picture book.
Oh, wonderful.
Bitty Kitty-CORN. So this is I think it's my book, it's probably my 38th book, but it's my very first picture book. So it is fun to celebrate with you.
That's great. That's great. Well, so Teresa, I think I'll jump in to the book reading, and I'm gonna just share my screen so you guys can follow along as well as reading. I'm not gonna read the whole book for sake of time, because I really want there to be more of a dialogue. But I also need to start by giving credit to our amazing artist and illustrator for Hannah and the Ramadan gift, Alia Jalil. She's just an amazing, talented, hardworking person who just loves her craft, clearly. And you'll see that in the illustrations as they come out today. She really just does a wonderful job of bringing these characters to life and really capturing what we were thinking. And so my deepest appreciation to her as well. So we'll start, if I can get my mouse to work. So it starts on the first day of Ramadan. When her Dadajan gently shook her awake, Hana Nur opened her eyes slowly, confused by the darkness. The sun hadn't even risen yet. But when she saw her grandfather smiling down at her, she remembered. Ramadan Mubarak, shouted Hana as she jumped out of bed. Hana had been counting down to the first day of Ramadan, the holy month of fasting for Muslims. And now it was finally here. Can I fast this year? Hana asked. Going from dawn to sunset without eating for a whole month seemed hard to Hana. But now that she was 8, she was surely old enough. How proud her grandma, Dadijan, would have been of her today. Not yet, my dear, Dadajan said. Fasting is for grown-ups, not for growing children. But if I can't fast, then how can I celebrate Ramadan? By saving the world, Dadajan said with a smile. Hurry up now. Let's join the others for Sehri before the sun comes up. When Hana heard Dadajan's response and smelled the food of Sehri, the special breakfast of Ramadan, she forgot her disappointment. After Sehri and the morning prayer, it was time to get ready for school. Let's stop at the soup kitchen on our way to school, Dadajan said. Why? Asked Hana. Don't we have plenty of soup at home? Dadajan explained. the soup isn't for us. When we fast during Ramadan, we feel hungry. And it reminds us that all over the world, there are people who don't have enough food. So we must help them. But the world has so many people. How can we help them all? Hana asked. We can help our neighbors, Dadajan replied. And that's worth the world. Later that day at school, Hana played with her friend Maria. That's the bell. We should get back to class, said Hana. Wait, cried Maria. I lost my grandma's necklace. Oh, what does it look like? It's gold with a green gemstone. Can you help me find it? Let's look in all the places we played today, Hana said. But the necklace wasn't on the basketball court or the kickball field. I know, let's look in the jungle gym, said Hana finally. And there it was. It must have fallen off when I did that backflip. Thank you, Hana. Hana rushed into class after the bell stopped ringing. Next time, please make sure you are on time, said Mrs. Holmes sternly. But I was just, Hana wanted to explain, but her teacher had already started reading again. Ramadan had just begun, and already Hana had gotten in trouble. Helping neighbors wasn't as easy as Dadajan made it seem. On the 11th day, Dadajan woke Hana early before sunrise. Shall we save the world again today, Dadajan? Hana asked excitedly. Then she remembered that today was also an important day at school, the big science fair, and she did not want to be late. Don't worry, Dadajan said. We're up in plenty of time to stop at the shelter before you go to school. Come, let's go. But Dadajan, the people at the shelter won't know that we're the ones who donated the clothes. Why does that matter, Hana? Asked Dadajan. Sometimes it's enough to help people simply out of love. Besides, he whispered with a wink, all the best superheroes work in secret, don't they? I'm going to stop there for a moment and in a moment pass to my friend Shannon, but that's basically the theme of this book, the message that I wanted to capture, this really powerful, unifying message that the purpose of Ramadan is to bring people together, is to bring humanity together and to build a sense of empathy and compassion for those around you. And there's a teaching that's common in the Abrahamic faiths, and it's in the Old Testament, it's in the Quran as well, that if you save one person, it's as if you saved all humanity. And so this message we're trying to infuse in young people that if you want to save the world, just start by serving your neighbor and taking care of those around you. And if you can do that effectively, then you've actually understood the purpose of Ramadan. And the rest of the story carries on that notion with the wonderful Eid party at the end. So hope you pick it up. And now it's my privilege to send it over to Shannon to read her book, which I loved reading, by the way.
Thank you so much. I wanted to have you keep going. I didn't want you to stop. That was fantastic. I was raised in a faith tradition where we fasted one 24-hour period once a month. And when I was younger, it was always about starving. It was like, oh, this is the worst day. But as I got older, and the concept behind it was you used to set aside the literal food you would have eaten for those 3 meals to donate to people who need it, and then eventually to donate the money, and then encouraged to be more generous than what you would have spent on those meals, but also a time to sacrifice and get out of your normal routine and feel something different, challenge yourself. That's wonderful. Thank you. My book is Itty-Bitty Kitty-Corn, and it is a book that I did with my best friend, Laywin Pham. Laywin Pham is an illustrator, and she's illustrated the Princess in Black series that I do with my husband, Dean, and she's illustrated the Real Friends, Best Friends, and Friends Forever graphic novels. So we've done a lot of books together. She's illustrated over 120 picture books. She's just fantastic and has written many on her own. This book came about when we were together on book tour, and it just was born of like pure love and friendship, that we tried to only work on it whenever we were side by side. And it's really hard to say who did what. I don't like taking credit for the lines, because it was really a partnership where we were going back and forth. And I hope you can feel like the real genuine love and friendship from it. So we actually have a video we're going to play of, because I wanted to include Wynn in it. So it's a video of me and Wynn reading the book.
Okay, everyone, so we're about to share this video.
Thank you, Teresa.
Here we go.
Itty bitty kitty corn. Kitty thinks she might be a unicorn. A horn sits atop her fuzzy head, pointing up, up, up to the sky. She feels so perfectly unicorny. Look at me, says Kitty.
You're not a unicorn, Putty Pie, says Parakeet. You're curled up like a cat, Fluffy Fry, says Gecko.
Kitty stands tall. She prances on her pod-clawed unicorn hooves. She gallops on her eensy-weensy unicorn legs. Look at me, says Kitty.
You're still not a unicorn, Fuzzy Hiney, says Parakeet. You have a stubby tail, Teeny Tiny, says Gecko.
Kitty closes her eyes. She concentrates and poof, her tail puffs up fat. Look at me, says Kitty.
You're never gonna be a unicorn, Funny Foo, says Parakeet. You meow in your sleep, Miffy Moo, says Gecko.
Nay, says Kitty. Nay, nay. She sticks her pink nose in their ears in case they didn't hear. Nay! You're a cat, says Parakeet. And that's that, says Gecko.
Still, Kitty's unicorn heart beats harder. She lifts her front hoof and sweeps her magnificent tail. The sun is low. The shadows are long. At last, she looks exactly how she feels. Ha ha! Look at me now! Yells Kitty.
Wow, says Parakeet, astonished. Woo, says Gecko, impressed. Finally, they see me, sings Kitty.
Until clop, clop, clop. Gecko points with his fat-tipped finger. Now that's a unicorn.
The unicorn brandishes his horn. He sweeps his magnificent tail. He neighs a mighty neigh. Suddenly, Kitty feels no bigger than a ball of lint.
Flop, flop, flop. Pardon me, says Unicorn.
Yes, squeaks Kitty.
I so admire your fuzzy ears and silver whiskers, says Unicorn.
You do? Says Kitty.
And I wondered, Unicorn looks right and then left. Did you know?
What? Says Kitty.
Did you know? Says Unicorn, whispering now.
What? What? Says Kitty.
Did you know, says Unicorn, that I am a kitty-corn? Kitty gasps. Her tiny tail twitches with joy.
Yes, says Kitty. I see that now. You are a kitty-corn. You are a fuzzy, furry, adorable kitty-corn. Unicorn nods. I knew that another kitty-corn like you would see.
Yes, says Kitty. I see you.
Kitty and Unicorn are both kitty-corns.
Kitty trots on her soft, teeny paws, and Unicorn pads on his huge golden hooves.
They both like to toss their manes and brandish their horns.
They both like to scamper after bumblebees and stretch out on a patch of grass.
And when the sun is low, their shadows merge till you can no longer tell one from the other. Yay, and that's kitty corn. Fantastic. Well, I would love just to talk with you about how you first came to write this book, Qasim. What
Sure.
first led you to this?
Well, and I'm going to ask you the same question too, but because it's a really good one, and I think the two words that come to mind often when I think about this book is representation matters. Growing up, I was addicted to reading, and my wife, in her own world, was addicted to reading. And so when we got married and started to have kids, we knew we wanted our kids to have that same love of reading as well. And as a kid in the 80s and 90s, going to the library to get books, you would find some great books on Christmas and some even on Hanukkah, which were all fun to read, but you would never find one on Ramadan. And now, fortunately, there are many, and mine is just the latest addition to a growing body of work. But there was certainly a lack of these kinds of books, even in the early 2000s when we started to have kids. And so, I was raised to believe that if you see a problem, instead of complaining about it, find a solution. And so I thought, let me just start working on a book. And at first, and as a very accomplished author, this better than most. It's not very easy, especially to break into the industry. And it takes time, it takes persistence, it takes the right team of people to trust and believe in you. And early on, there were a lot of, doors slammed shut, not open in the first place. And the general consensus was there's not really a market for this, is not really that much sought after. That's changed. And in part because of people like, my agent, Dentistry, she's just phenomenal and believed in the idea. Penguin Publishing believed in the idea, and it got us to where we are today. So for me, this really is about trying to create something that better reflects the world, that gives children a more honest and accurate and meaningful assessment of the world. Not to replace anything or not to take away from some of the wonderful children's books on Christmas and Hanukkah and Kwanzaa and all other wonderful holidays that people celebrate. We should have more of them. I think this, in a way, just kind of helps create more of the conversation so that young people can not only, Muslim children can not only see themselves reflected and represented, but children of other faiths can read a book like this and be more aware and be more cognizant of just the diversity that's out there, and be more willing to be part of it and embrace it. That's really where the motivation for this kind of book came from me.
So there's the concept that books should be both mirrors and windows, right?
Yeah.
That every kid deserves to find, and not just one lone token book, but many books where they can see themselves reflected back. But also kids need books that are windows, that are going to show them vistas that they wouldn't have otherwise seen. A lot of kids live in very homogenous areas where they don't have a chance to meet. There are two cities that actually are, I could see where they are out my window, that are always in the top 5 least diverse cities in the country, in terms of race, religion, economics, and everything. It's very, very homogenous. And I think about kids in places like that, who really aren't going to meet a lot of people very different from them in a lot of ways in their own school, in their own neighborhood. Books are that's what books are. And the way that we develop compassion and empathy for people different from us is by knowing their stories. And when we can't meet in person, delving into a book through the point of view of a different character different from us is the best way to develop empathy. So it has, I believe passionately that it has real world effects. And you were talking about, books about Christmas, of which there are so many, and you referenced that there are some wonderful books about Ramadan, but still it's like compared to Christmas, there's still there's still so much more need for books about Muslim Americans, for books about people that have been from underrepresented communities for far too long. And shout out to organizations like We Need Diverse Books that have helped bring this lack of diversity in books really forefront, to encourage, so that publishers like you encountered closed doors in the beginning. I really credit We Need Diverse Books, and but not just them, so many people who have been working so hard in this field to create awareness that this is way, way underrepresented and we need this, and it has started opening doors.
Yeah, very well said. And I'd love to kind of throw the same question back at you. You obviously published, you said 38, this is your 38th book, which is incredible. What a remarkable achievement due to decades of hard work. What inspired a picture book this time around?
I've written many picture books over the years. So I write a lot of novels, and I love having small projects to kind of tinker with in between because I'm obsessive and I can't take breaks. I write all the time. I don't have, and that's not saying that's the right way to do it. That's just how I am.
Works for you,
I
yeah.
don't feel good unless I'm creating. And so I like having little things to work on in between larger projects, but nothing in other picture books I ever wrote were worth anything. I think there's a misconception that picture books must be easier because they're shorter, and that's just not true. It's not only writing something shorter, it takes longer because you're examining every word so carefully, but also it's just the right concept that's going to capture the imagination of certain kids, and that's right for that form that deserves to be illustrated. So I just never came across anything that I thought I was terrible at it. So it really was just working with my best friend, coming up with something together that was the magic combination.
Yeah, I mean, what's that old saying by Abraham Lincoln that I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long one.
Yeah. What was it like? I apologize for the length of my letter. If I'd had more time, it would have been shorter. Yeah, or something like that.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
so true.
and I mean, like just reading your, Itty Bitty Kitty Corn. I mean, I think it's probably no more than 200 words, maybe 250 words, something like that. But every word, it flows so smoothly, and it looks so natural. But the work behind it, you probably went through like 30 iterations to get it to that point.
Yeah.
Because what looks so smooth at the
Yeah.
end certainly didn't begin very smoothly on the first draft.
Yeah, Win and I are working on book 2 right now, and we had a great concept, and I wrote many versions of the text, and then she did some sketch versions of the text. And every time we kind of sketch versions of the book, and every time we had our little sketch dummy, is what you call me, all these little dummies of the book, we would look through it, and it just wasn't quite right. And we spent, I guess, a year and a half just on this sequel, because we want to get it done in advance, and it just wasn't working. And then one time she had the idea to delete one thing, just to delete one little action that was seemed like it was essential to me, of a chain of actions that happened in the book. But by deleting that one, everything that came after it meant more. There was more opportunity for humor, and the final action that happened just had more weight, and it hadn't occurred to me to delete it. um, Crafting stories sometimes is like that. It's not straightforward. It's not just a formula that you plug things into. um, and it takes a lot of revisions because it's about the words feeling right, but it's also just about what happens next, and moving stuff around and deleting and trying new things. And it's very experimental. I've talked to scientists who had the idea um, that writing was very much, first you have the thesis sentence, and then you have the supporting sentences, and then you have a conclusion sentence. And I was like, I thought science was memorize this, then memorize that, then memorize this. And they were like, no, science is when you go out in the backyard and you dig up a pail of dirt, and then you dump the dirt on the table and you look through it and you see what you got. And I was like, what? That sounds like writing.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, I think, and by the way, Teresa, if there's questions, we'd love to take questions too. But Shannon, to kind of build on that really insightful point, I've always seen writing as an art and a science. And it's when you understand the science so well that you can turn it into art, right? Then you can bend the rules and even break some of the rules. But because you know the science so well, it actually does become art and not just a bunch of gobbledygook, as my high school creative writing teacher used to call it. And I think that's really what you've done with this book. You've taken just these really they look like simple concepts now, but you've put so much into them that it just shows the immense amount of work and attention to detail. So kudos to you on that.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
I thought I saw a question or a comment in the Q&A, Teresa.
Oh,
Sure.
yeah.
So we've got quite an interesting question from a Dean Christopher, who says, I love the idea in Qasim's book that a superhero might have a secret identity, not because they want to protect their loved ones from villains, but to serve without credit or pride. Can you think of any existing heroes who do this or could be reimagined to take this approach?
That's a really cool question, Dean. So the whole concept here, right, is that you do good in Ramadan in general, but then you increase your charity in Ramadan, not because you're looking for some kind of reward or because you're going to make somebody happy. You're doing it because it's the right thing to do. It's a good thing to do. Serving those around you is basically the purpose of life, and you don't do it for any kind of reward. And now, Dean, you're asking this question to somebody who just got finished watching um, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and so now my mind is kind of racing through that. And I'll just be careful not to give any spoilers away, but I think kind of the way Isaiah is the original Black Captain America, and the work that he did for this country for decades and decades and doesn't get recognition, I think is an example of that, right? Of somebody who did sacrifice. Now, he's obviously and appropriately angry and furious about it. But that's where I love how they developed the character of Sam to take his identity as a Black man who has suffered under, you know, horrifically racist conditions, and still wear the stars and stripes proudly, and you know, and recognize what hatred he may be getting, but still doing it for the right reasons of serving serving the country, serving and fighting for the cause of justice. And I like how they make that juxtaposition, that difference between him and John Walker. And so I've said too much, but I think that's kind of one of the ways I look at it, Dean. It's a really good question. I could talk about this all day.
I love the superheroes too. I watched this series as well, without giving too much away. I loved the I was thinking actually last night as I was watching the finale,
Yeah.
like, why don't we have superheroes? And then I was realizing, I was thinking about kind of the complication of that, because a lot of the comic book and movie superheroes are superheroes because they have particular abilities for violence. And I'm not sure that that's actually what we need, you know, because he was most powerful, without giving too much away, when he spoke. Like, he's so fantastic to watch in action, Falcon, Captain America. But when he spoke up and he could change minds, and he protected people by using the passion of his love and care for them, as well as his, you know, reasoning that, you know, just look at this in a different way, and to not be indelicate about it. I don't want to make you embarrassed, but Qasim, that's what you do. I mean, it's absolutely what you do, and every day. And that's why I admire you so much, is you are out there doing that kind of superhero work. I don't want to embarrass you, but I just respect that so much. And I know that you've changed so many people's lives and hearts, and brought so much understanding, and you're so kind and genuine about it, that you can really feel that through your words. So thank you for not only this wonderful book that's going to bring people more understanding and empathy and help other kids see themselves in books who haven't, but also just all the work that you do. You do make the world a better place.
I mean, that's very kind of you. That's extraordinarily kind of you, Shannon. Thank you for that. I mean, I think
Sure.
really this is something that I'm grateful that we have voices like yours as well, Shannon. I mean, this is where I think, you know, children's literature in general is just so critical to how we develop our country going forward. You know, at a time right now where we see anti-Asian hate crimes at record highs, anti-Semitic hate crimes at record highs, anti-immigrant hate crimes at record highs. You know, these are generational injustices, and they're not going to be solved overnight, right? There's no, to use another Marvel thing, there's no Thanos snap of the finger that's going to, you know, change going forward. It's going to require deliberate action on parts of people willing to be out there and tell those stories and narratives. And I think that's really where we can be most effective in inoculating, I would say, the next generation, so that young children can see themselves represented in a meaningful way, and they can see a diverse viewpoint. I love this, you know, wisdom that you shared, Shannon, of windows and mirrors, right? They can see themselves reflected, and they can look through a window and see, hey, that's actually a normal and cool thing. There's a story my wife often tells. She wears a headscarf when she goes out, and she tells a story of how when our eldest was in second grade, they asked for chaperones for a field trip, parent chaperones for a field trip. And he didn't want my wife to be a chaperone because he was afraid that the kids in his class would make fun of her for wearing a headscarf. And so she took that as an opportunity to volunteer and then speak to these kids and show them, like take off her headscarf in front of them and show them that, look, I actually, I have hair. I'm not bald. I'm not, and if I was, there's nothing wrong with that. But this is just part of my identity. And so what that ended up doing is it gave my son the confidence to see someone who he cares most about in the whole world reflected among his friends, and then saw, gave those kids the opportunity to look through the window, to see something that they normally wouldn't have seen otherwise. And I think the biggest success out of that is that as those kids grow up, and if somebody says something, Islamophobic or misogynist about Muslim women, they can say, hold on a second, you're wrong, and here's why, right? And I think that level of education is more valuable than you can put a price tag on. I think that's really what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Humanity for everybody, and stories help with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love, Shannon, to, as we're waiting for more questions, to kind of get your thoughts. Well, actually, Teresa, I take it back. Dean has another question for Shannon. Yeah, I had one, but I'll ask later.
I have a few questions too, so we'll make sure to get to those. Also, I'm like a little teary from the conversation you just shared, so gather myself. But this is another question from Dean, who says he's sorry to hog the questions, but is asking, Shannon, did you and Wynn consider other animal combinations besides the cat and unicorn?
We did this, no, for this book, no, we didn't, because we specifically came out of the idea, we were like, we wanted to do something together, and we were actually just playing a game. We weren't even thinking about it as a book, but we were thinking about what our kids love, and we have cats, and we have children who are just like identify as cats. They just are so obsessed with cats. Everything is cat. And then our kids were also equally really enchanted by unicorns. And so that's how that combination came about. But she actually created these really fun sketches of a bunch of different animals. And if you go, my publisher is Abrams, ABRAHMS, is that right? So here's a little fact for you. I'm a terrible speller. You don't have to be a great speller to be a writer. Spell check. So anyway, they're on their website. You can download them for free, these PDFs of these wonderful animal sketches she did. And when we did school visits, we would have like print-ups for the kids. And then we would like brainstorm, what other animal does this animal love and want to be? And so we would come up, like there's an octopus that we turned into a dog or a shark or a squirrel, or you just find key features of them to add on to it. And it's a really fun activity. So even without these print-ups, you could do that with kids at home, have them draw an animal and then like choose another animal. You can like write little scripts of paper and put it in a bowl, and they draw one out, and then you add a squirrel tail to it, or you add an elephant trunk to it, or whatever. It's a really fun game. I answered that right. Did I go?
Yes, you definitely answered that. I'm going to jump in if I can. With a question. This can be for both of you, more so for Shannon, because you've written for such a variety of ages so far. You just had a YA novel that came out last year. Obviously, this is a picture book for a younger audience, and so I was hoping that both of you could talk about what it's like to write for different ages, and Qasim in particular, like why you chose to write a book for such a young age, and do you think it would have had the same effect if you had written something for someone a little older, if that makes sense?
Yeah, because Qasim, you've done a lot of writing for adults as well.
Yeah. But I mean, I think the question though, I really would like to hear thoughts on Shannon, because you have written a wide range, and what you've written prior to this is something I aspire to. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this first before I give my answer.
So part of the reason why, because I write picture book, early chapter book, middle grade, young adult, and adult. And part of the reason why I do that is because I get bored easily. And if something starts to feel too easy to me, I don't want to do it anymore. So I'm constantly challenging myself, constantly trying new genres and things. But one example of why I chose a younger audience would be the Princess in Black series. So when we originally came up with the Princess in Black idea, it was a princess who loves her pink dresses and her glass slippers, but when monsters come, she puts on the black mask and cape and she fights the monsters. And she loves equally both sides of herself. And I easily could have been a middle grade book, a young adult book, but I I specifically wanted to do it for a much younger audience, like 5 to 8. And the reason why is in my career, I have often been labeled as a writer for girls. This happens a lot to women writers. Women are seen as men. Men have voices that can speak for everybody, but women only speak to girls. And I've written a lot and spoken a lot about this. There have even been times when I've gone to schools and they've pulled the girls out of class to hear me speak, but left the boys behind because I obviously wouldn't have anything of value to say to boys because I'm a woman. And this was exacerbated by my most famous book was called Princess Academy. And that just felt like it was labeled and a gendered kind of book. But it's not. I've had many boy readers. But because I've seen all of this happening, I meet so many adults who just tell me, boys will not read books about girls. They just won't. They find it insulting to them because girls are demeaning. To be thought of as a girl is lesser. For a girl to be thought of as like a boy is aspirational, but for boys to care about girls is demeaning, which is just so tragic and not true. So I wanted to write a book that would be irresistible to any child, regardless of gender. And I wanted it for young enough before they've been indoctrinated, because it's right around 3rd grade where it's really, if they've been indoctrinated one way, it's really hard to hit that back out. But before 3rd grade, that age, most kids don't notice or care. They don't notice the race of the protagonist in the book. They don't notice the gender. They just are interested in the story and they'll go along with you. It's not until they get older that's been beaten into them. You can only read books by people or about people who look like you. And so that's why I specifically chose that audience. And I tell you, I had so many people tell me, boys will not read anything called The Princess in Black. This is going to be a mistake. Just market it for girls. And I said, absolutely not. And we've blown it out of the water. I get pictures of boys dressed up like princesses in black every day of the week. We've got 8 books out. It's been just as popular with any gender. And I love that we were able to prove that as a falsehood, as a lie. And the reason why I wanted to make it a princess book is I didn't want it to be sometimes people are like, you can make it about a girl, but make it unclear on the cover that it's a girl. I was like, no, princess is in the title. No one's going to be able to deny that this is a book about a girl, and they're still going to like it. And then no one will be able to argue with me. And hooray, it came true.
It's amazing. No, bravo. That's incredible. I mean, I think it goes back to when you're authentic to who you are and what you believe, then people are drawn to that authenticity. But if you waste your time trying to pretend to appeal to people in a way that just isn't you, then not only do you lose the people who trusted you for who you are, but then the people who you do attract don't really care for who you are. And so it's a very, mediocre relationship. So kudos to you, Shannon. I mean, that's powerful. That's extraordinarily beautiful to know that's been the success going forward. So yeah, I've written, this is my first foray into children's literature, period, of any stretch of the imagination. Most of the work I've written has been, law review articles, on like international human rights law or religious freedom issues or, Jim Crow, systemic racism issues. I mean, it's pretty heavy stuff. The op-eds I've written on are dealing with, economic justice, combating domestic and sexual violence. I mean, some really heavy duty stuff. And this was, a big shift. And in one respect, Shannon, I one thing you said, a lot of things have resonated with me, but one thing that really resonated was, I don't want to be bored when I'm writing. I want a new challenge. And this children's book was as difficult or more difficult than anything I've ever written before, because of just, all the reasons we already talked about. And I deliberately wanted the protagonist here to be a girl, and particularly a girl of color. I thought about kind of growing up, of all the hundreds, probably thousands of books that I read growing up, I can't remember too many that had a girl as a protagonist, or a girl of color in particular as a protagonist. I mean, this is 30, 35 years ago. But I think there's data out there now as well that still kind of talks about the massive lopsidedness of how few protagonists are girls or girls of color. And so I wanted that to be kind of very clear here. But then also, you know, I'm blessed to have a 5-year-old girl, you know, named Hannah, who this book is about. And one of the most rewarding things for me was when we got the cover and I showed it to her. Her first reaction, her knee-jerk reaction was, "Abu, it's me. Look, it's me on the cover." Like she literally saw a mirror. She saw herself, and you know, I can't express really how heartwarming and how beautiful that felt. And now she's gotten so possessive of the book that when I sign books to send to friends or family or to what have you, and she catches me, she'll complain that I'm ruining her book by writing in it. And she'll go tell on me to her mom that Abu is ruining my book by writing in it. You told me not to write in books, make him stop. And and I love it. I don't tell her why I'm writing in it, because I want her to feel that sense of ownership, and just and so I apologize to her, and I tell her I promise I'll try not to do it again. That's a short-lived promise.
I love that. That is a confusion with kids, isn't it?
Yeah.
I remember one time, probably a kid about 6 years old came through my line, and the grandma had bought one of my books, and so I opened it up to sign it, and she just looked at me with like anger, and she said, "Why did you scribble in my book?" And to be fair, my signature is not legible. It is a scribble. And she was so upset. I mean, she had been told by her teachers, "You don't write in books." And then here I went and she got a brand new, beautiful book and she shows it to me and I scribble in it. I can totally see from her point of view how
Oh,
that's just rude.
it's literary blasphemy is what it is.
I love that she identifies that as her book. That is so beautiful. And what a gift to see herself on a cover of a book. Is there any way that a parent can say more to a kid, "You matter," than that? You are worthy of a story. And I think that's what I'm so most passionate about in children's books, is making sure that every kid is worthy of knows that they're worthy of a story. And I'm not the right author to write all of those. We need to make sure that we are welcoming to authors of all different backgrounds that can have a point of view that's unique from what's been told over and over again. So I love that you're doing it, and we need you to stay in children's books. It's a beautiful community.
It is. I love it.
So I'm gonna piggyback a little bit on your last answer, Qasim, where you talked about how it was as hard to write this book as it was to write many of your other essays. Could you talk a little bit about that challenge of writing picture books? How long was the process? Was there any point in time where you were like, you know, this might not happen? Because everyone knows that publishing could be an opaque black hole at times. So can you talk a little bit about your experience for your first kids book?
Really insightful question, Teresa. I mean, I think it really is learning a different language, learning a different set of tools altogether. You know, when you're writing something really academic, like a law review article, right? There's certain rules of research and, you know, verification that you follow. You know, what's a reliable source? What isn't a reliable source? And you really are, you know, the general rule of writing like an academic law review article is nobody cares about your opinion. Everybody cares about the opinion of the expert on the subject you're writing about. And so you're just doing research. You've got 30 books open, and you're in the library, and you're on the internet, and you're, you know, digging up all these factoids. And then it's just a matter of presenting the data and research. And it's actually, you know, once you master it, it's pretty simple. You know, writing an op-ed, you're trying to tell a story while appealing to an 8th grade mindset, because that's typically the age level that people digest information at best for op-eds. But for a book, a children's book, a picture book like this, it's just learning an entirely different way of communicating, because one, you have a new medium of illustrations to be able to help convey your picture, convey your story. And so you have to resist the urge to spell out everything in words, because you want to leave the picture, the illustrator to kind of fill the gap, so to speak, and to give the overriding picture. And so resisting that urge to be too verbose it can be difficult. The other part of it, I think, is remembering that you're speaking to children in a way that isn't condescending or arrogant. You're trying not to talk down to children. You have to give children credit that they're actually much smarter than we often give them credit for, and that they're much more insightful as well. And so certain things, certainly, if there's like a really complex idea, you need to find a way to kind of break it down. But there's a lot of other things that kids will pick up very, very quickly if you just give them the chance and trust them to do so. And so for that, it was testing it out on my own kids. And they were kind of the experimental bunnies in this conversation to just test out an idea, test out. And the first draft of it, they kind of got bored and like started wandering away before I finished. I'm like, okay, well, that didn't work. So let's try this again. And it's kind of that trial and error. And I think once you get to a point where you've done enough of these, you can start to kind of pick up what's going to work faster. And that's just like any craft, right? Whether you're a musician or whether you are, a painter or a sculptor or a public speaker, in any craft, right? You know what works and what doesn't for you. And you know kind of where your voice falls in. And this is where I give credit to people like my agent and the editors at Penguin for kind of helping me find my voice and find the way that I can communicate in the most effective way that reflects who I am. That process took about 2 years. And that's about how long it took to really write this book and get it to where it needed to be. But I cherish it, and I look forward to the next chapter. This hopefully isn't the last we've seen of Hannah. But I think now that we have kind of a basis to build from, I'm excited about what the future brings.
Am I allowed to ask at all about what we might be expecting next?
Of course, no. I didn't sound coy. Already the response we're getting from folks is that people love the story, which is really encouraging and heartwarming. And there's obviously more than one holiday in the Muslim faith in Islam. And so what's your experience with the other holidays or with the other experiences, and how can we kind of talk about that? So we'll see. And then are picture books the only medium through which we're going to tell the story? There could potentially be other mediums as well. And so a lot of it's up in the air. It's in that whole, and Shannon knows way better than I ever will, given her accomplished record. But there's so many things happening at once that planets kind of have to align for it to come together. So as those planets begin to align, we'll share more. But one thing's for sure, we're going to see, God willing, more examples of this kind of a character in the future.
Wonderful.
I remember, Qasim, you said you had a question for Shannon. Did you want to get that in before the end of the hour? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the question I wanted to ask, Shannon, given your ability to write on such a wide array of audiences and communicate to those wide array of audiences, how do you calibrate your thinking and your organizational process, your information gathering process? How do you calibrate yourself to train yourself that, okay, now I'm writing for a 3 to 7 versus now I'm writing for a 12 to 14? Those are two very different groups, and they require two very different skill sets. What's the key to your magic in doing that?
For me, it's not really a challenge. It's kind of like if your 5-year-old comes in and asks you a question, you know how to respond to her. And then if a 12-year-old asks you, or an adult, you know the voice that you use. And what you said earlier about writing picture books, not talking down to children, and so I think it does help that I'm a mom. I think that does actually help, because I see in my own house, I've got a 17-year-old, I've got a 14-year-old and 2 10-year-olds, and I've been through the last 17 years of them at every age, and see what they understand at different ages and what captivates them. We always tend to probably use a little higher vocabulary than they understand, trusting that they'll figure it out from context, and they do. I just trust them with that, and I always, If they don't understand, then they ask to, be the obviously not belittling of their lack of knowledge and just welcoming that kind of, yes, ask me when you don't understand. So I think I just carry that same kind of attitude into my writing. You are welcome here. You don't have to understand everything, but I also trust you to get it. And let's go on an adventure together. And there are some specific things. For example, early chapter books are actually quite different even than picture books. There's a tradition of using very short sentences, because you think about an early chapter book, a picture book, usually a parent is reading, or a teacher, an adult is usually reading the book to the child. But with an early chapter book, it's often the child reading on their own for the first time. So there's a certain gentleness that we take with that, that we're mindful of. We think about shorter sentences. And when we're introducing some of those bigger, chunkier words, because these aren't early readers, they're different. We can use any words we want. We can use the whole lexicon. But we do want to be mindful as we're using these bigger words that they may not know, to make sure we're using it in a context that they can figure out. And I usually have a rule of 3, that I use it 3 times throughout the book so that they can come away from that having learned that new word. But besides those, little tricks, sky's the limit with kids' books. You can just do anything. And that's what's so magical about kids. Adults get bored and but kids, so many ideas are new for them. And as long as you're treating them with respect, they will go on adventures with you. I love it.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Okay, so let's go ahead and finish out with one last question. This is a question I like to ask of pretty much all kids book authors, which is, what is your advice for either an adult who wants to write a picture book or wants to start off writing a picture book, and what is your advice for a kid who wants to write a book? And what wisdom would you like to impart upon them?
My wisdom would be the same for both of them. Just read stuff that you love, because you're going to write the kind of stuff that you read. So just find wonderful, wonderful books that you enjoy, and support your local independent bookseller. Today is Independent Bookstore Day. Today is a great day to go in person if they're open, or order online from your local bookstore. They give so much to the community. But specifically, if you want to be a writer, you want independent bookstores to exist. Because what happens is, if there's no more independent bookstores, then there's one conglomerate that purchases all the books to sell. And so there's one entity that's deciding what's for sale. And if they don't like something, they don't sell it. And that directly affects freedom of speech and what stories get told. So independent bookstores really matter. So support them today and every day.
Wow, that was a really good answer. I wish I'd gone first. Yeah, co-sign everything Shannon said. That was brilliant. I would add persistence. You're not going to get it right the first time or the second time or even 10th time. And being persistent is, and this goes for a lot of things, but certainly for writing as well. Being persistent is, I think, a kind of an underrated skill sometimes, because it's so limited in the reward that you get sometimes, because the reward is delayed and sometimes it's denied and sometimes it's delayed some more. But I often think about how whatever gaps in representation or in knowledge we see today, they're not by accident. They're the result of generations of policy, generations of decisions made to get us to where we are today. And undoing that harm or undoing that injustice or filling that gap isn't going to happen again overnight. It's going to require folks to be persistent. I think about the icons and the leaders that got us here. Like the Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the Dr. Kings and the Malcolm X's and the Rosa Parks and John Lewis's, right? They worked for generations and generations and generations to get us from where we were to where we are now. And we can still proceed and see what else needs to be done because of the work they did, right? James Baldwin's, right? And so that persistence, I think, is a it's a non-negotiable. It's a absolute requirement. So if you write something, you're not happy with it and it gets rejected, that's not a bad thing. It's a step forward, and it's going to allow you to ultimately achieve what that goal is, provided you are persistent, provided, as Shannon really beautifully said, that you keep reading what you love, and let your art that you put out there be a reflection of that too.
It's wonderful. So a big warm thank you to our speakers, Qasim Rashid and Shannon Hale. Thank you both for sharing your time and your energy and wisdom with us today. I particularly want to thank you both for writing the books that you do. One of the pleasures of working at an independent bookstore is you often meet a child and you watch them grow up and see what kind of books they end up reading as they age. And so I'm excited to recommend these books to some kids the next time I'm in the store. So before we say goodbye, I want to mention one more time that if you'd like to order a copy online of Hannah and the Ramadan Gift or Itty Bitty Kitty-Corn, you can get yours by clicking on the links that I've dropped into the chat box, or you can go ahead and hit us up in person at Chevalier's Books. As Shannon mentioned, today is a special day because it is Independent Bookstore Day. All right, so Shannon and Qasim, once more, thank you. Before I end this meeting, any last words before we say goodbye?
Happy Ramadan.
Thank you, Jen. Happy Ramadan. No, just much love to all of you. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you to Shivali's, Teresa for emceeing, and thank you to all of our viewers today. God bless you guys, and thank you for your amazing support.
Wonderful. Thanks everyone for joining us. Happy Ramadan, happy Independent Bookstore Day, and we will see you later. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, Teresa.